Welcome back. I'm joined in the studio with Mr. Ashraf Naguib, who is the Secretary General of the Asia-Egypt Business Association.
My opinion, Sinai is just a symbolism of not only that specific piece of land that has been ignored and neglected throughout the years. We live on 6% of our total land area. So the significance of Sinai here, yes, on a strategic level, but it is, again, an indication of a trend that we have been ignoring a lot of our land and a lot of developments that could take place in the Western Desert, in the south of the country. So Sinai is just significance because of the Suez Canal and because of the potential and because of proximity of such an important canal like the Suez Canal is in terms of world trade, in terms of global trade. So yes, it's very, very important that we really look at what we're going to do with Sinai in terms of development. And we have to understand that the specialized economic zones, the Sea Zone, this new development project that we're doing is not just based on the eastern side of the canal, but is also based on the western side as well. And that is very important that we look at it as a collective approach to building and developing on the banks of the Suez Canal. So it's as important as Sinai is. Believe it or not, there's a lot of people that might think a lot of the projects that we are aspiring to build in Sinai might not need to be there, like heavy industries. We want to look at things that are related mostly to servicing the Suez Canal and the ships and the shipping industry in general. And at the same time, we want a lot of manufacturing and the light industries, because this is something that we lack here in Egypt rather than large industry. There's a lot of other places in Egypt that we can start placing large industry that would have more strategic significance than just Sinai. Yes, we did dig the Suez Canal, the corridor, and that was extremely important. A lot of people argue not on the how and not on the why, but on the when. Was this a priority or not for us to be able to put $8 billion into a project like that? Now, if we wouldn't have done that, we would have continued for the next 10 and 20 years having these conversations about why did we not expand the Suez Canal? Why are we not building on the banks of the Suez Canal? And really offer, to be honest, unless you start making significant economic reforms. And this is one of the
Is that not taking place in your opinion?
No, not fast enough, because if it was, then we wouldn't be opting for the IMF loan at this point. The IMF loan is, yes, worth $12 billion. That's what we're aiming at. I usually say these loans, if they come at 1% or 1.5% on their interest, then they're fine, we can take them. It's what comes attached with the IMF loans usually that is the problem with most nations. And that's why we were completely against an IMF loan of $2.6 billion 4 years ago or 5 years ago, and we're still against the principle itself. But what the message the Egyptian government is saying to the world is that we are ready to commit 100% to these austerity measures and economic reforms that will get us out of the financial and economic crisis that we're in. That being said, then why could we have not done it on our own? So it's not the 12 billion themselves.
But don't you need the injection? Don't you need the clean bill of health? Because whenever you talk to certain responsible people or officials, they tell you the IMF loan is not just the 12 billion. It's also a clean bill of health that for the investor not to feel that there is a concern. Again, or could we have done it another way?
No, it could have been done another way, and at the same time, it's not a clean bill of health at all, because all it says is that you do have a problem, you are sick, you now have to recover. And that recovery is, if it's not the $12 billion at all, because we've had injections of that amount from our Arab neighbors over the past 3 years. It is, again, how can I explain this? It is maybe seeking the discipline of having an international organization regulate your economic reform under the concept of a $12 billion loan at 1.5%.
Is this what we're doing? Are they regulating? Because whenever you talk about subsidy, it was in the plan and we already started initiating it. The value of the Egyptian pound, we have to be honest with ourselves. We've been protecting it too long. And the time has come to kind of let go. And even though it's painful, but c'est la vie. What kind of reforms do you think that are being imposed by the IMF that do not fall within your economic reform plan?
There's no two people can argue on what is needed in terms of economic reform now in Egypt, because history has taught us throughout the decades past of economic change and reform in Eastern Europe, in Southeast Asia, in Latin America. We've seen examples even in Africa. The Arab countries are also other good examples of economic change and reform. Saudi Arabia is embarking on economic reform today. So we know the formula. We know exactly what needs to be done. But what we have been very prudent with in the past 4 to 5 years is the political decision. The political and the social aspect of economic reform, like you were saying, painful. Yes, economic reform is agonizing. There's an agony behind what we need to do. And because we have 48% of our population that lives under the poverty line, it is very difficult for you to discount them when you're looking at economic growth. So you're looking at the balance between that social commitment and that global economic growth that you want to do. So finding that balance is extremely difficult. So alone as a political will, it might be more, how can I say, acceptable to the Egyptian people, knowing that this is a reality that we need to live, and as a political leadership, we won't do it alone. We will have an international community support us in putting the guidelines and really implementing and putting the pressure on us for us to be able to really take these significant changes within our economic perspective and our economic future. Actually did was invest in this project. So the first thing that we saw was Egyptians investing into the Suez Canal corridor, and we cannot emulate, we cannot repeat that on a regular basis. So today we really have to look at foreign investors from a different perspective, what it is that they want. If the minister says that now their supply or their demand for electricity and energy is being met and being met efficiently, well, their supply or their demand for foreign currency is not being met at this point, so one without the other won't work. So no matter how much we market it, no matter how much we say that we planned and how much we actually create models of what we're going to do, unless there is real significant growth and change within the macro and microeconomic environment in Egypt, it is a total waste of time. The other thing that people need to understand regarding the Suez Canal that we heard over the past couple of days and maybe in the past year on the significance of its actual revenue growth. Now, I like to look at this from a different perspective. It wasn't a wrong project at all, but it's almost as if opening a, burger shop on the day that somebody, gets infected with mad cow disease. And that's really the significance of how the global economy impacts whatever happens in Egypt. Now, we have a fantastic project, but it's being affected today by the price of the oil around the world, by the depreciation of global trade. All of these things are really impacting. And additionally, that we have global competition in the Panama Canal and different other routes that are now being promoted and being utilized as well by the global shipping industry. The way that we market Egypt to these people is by numbers. It's by realism, by professionals that really can back up the numbers that we're talking about. Again, investors don't look just at short term, they look at long term. And we have to convince them on many fronts, and we have to market a lot of what we do in terms of our political strategy and direction, in terms of our social strategy and direction, in terms of our economic strategy and direction and ambitions. These three put together with the plans that we have in development in energy, in the Suez Canal, in the Western Desert, these are parts of how we market Egypt to these foreign investors. Now, a very, very important part of it is for us to be able to go to them, show them these numbers, show them what projects that we have, or vice versa, like we did in the Sharm el-Sheikh conference a year and a bit ago. But the point is, like Doctor was saying, that we have to have these products. I mean, we can't market a prototype of something. We can always promote a prototype, but at the end of the day, people do not invest just in prototypes. They have to invest in something that is solid, something that has to be cohesive, has to be collective, and that is a total economic reform agenda that really comes around with change rather than just slogans on, yes, Egypt is progressing, Egypt is moving forward. Global issues around the world, people are going through their own problems and their own issues, and the second, that should give us the time to be able to do and achieve the economic reform policies that we want to put into place for us to be able to move into the 2055. Maybe we will not see it in our lifetime, but everything that we do today is actually for the children in the future, and that's really how we have to think about it. Our generation has already lost the opportunity, so we might as well sacrifice whatever is left in our lives to be able to give a better life and a better future for Egyptians.